reality of phantoms and monsters. They exist among us, and sometimes they win. Even the devil was an angel once. The world has its own rules, and these rules are not human. Some of us seek answers to the origin and existence of cryptids and the unexplained. Join us as we venture beyond the known and accepted boundaries. Welcome to our nightmare. I think you're going to like it.
Hey folks, good evening and welcome to Fans of Monsters Radio, where we talk about a little bit about everything actually, but mostly cryptids, unexplained sightings and encounters. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Chicago Lake Michigan Mothman winged humanoid phenomena. But before we start, the Fans of Monsters Radio channel is made possible by you clicking the subscribe button and by sharing the program. Super chat, super thank donations are appreciated. Buy me a coffee link is available. So, and tonight, if you do have questions, please type them in caps. Bernadette will be in the background. She'll be marking the questions for us to answer. So we'll go from there. So tonight I have Tobias Wayland joining me, as well as Manuel Navarette. And we're going to start right off trying to catch up on what we haven't talked about in the past 6 months. We last time we were together on here was in November, and we've had 9 different reports since then. So I do want to, so I'll go ahead and put up here the first one that we have had that we missed. Oh yeah, this was sent to Manuel. This was the little village woman and her father who had left the grocery store over on 32nd Street. So Manuel, why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that happened in the little village neighborhood. And if you are from there, it's a very Hispanic area. It's the largest Hispanic area in the entire city. It's also known as La Bellita, which is little village. The one thing is, the residential neighborhoods are like, you'll go like 2 blocks of residential, when on the corner you'll have like a little, what they call a tiendita, bodega, little grocery stores basically that dot the entire area. So this lady and her father, who was like 81 years old, were leaving the store. They had gone to go get a couple of things for the house, and across the street there was a house that had a kind of a wrought iron fence that had the concrete post in between, and on top of one of that was the this creature, and as a winged humanoid, but it wasn't as big as some of the other ones. This one was, she said, maybe about 4 foot tall, had a very long tail and very large wings, and it immediately just locked eyes with them, was watching them. The one interesting thing that I picked off right off the bat was, right in front of where this thing was sitting on top of one of these pillars was a street light. Normally this whole area would be illuminated with that street light, but this thing seemed to be absorbing light. You could still tell the outline. It had a long tail. It had like a little pointed tail. And she kept saying that it was swishing it around, kind of like she likened it to her cat when her cat's interested in something. So it kept moving the tail from side to side, and kind of just like slowly kind of opening and closing its wings. She immediately started feeling, really scared. Her dad saw it, and she was really worried about her dad. Her dad being as old as he was, I mean, he's not going to be able to, run if this thing decided to go after them. So they slowly made their way to the car, and she says that when she clicked the alarm to turn it off, it chirped. That's when this thing took off into the air and was hovering right there. Um, Mind you, this whole time it was watching them the whole time they was across the street. And the more they moved, the more its tail just kept swishing around. Um, Kind of like it was really, really just curious. Um, when this thing chirped, this thing took off into the air, was hovering in place, and she and her dad got in as fast as they possibly could, and this thing circled around them and then just took off.
Mm-hmm.
She described it when I spoke with her. Um, she described it like about 4 foot tall. She says it was small. I kept asking her, was this about 7 foot tall? And the normal parameters for most of these sightings, especially out at the airport, 7 foot tall, large wingspan. She says the wingspan was maybe, 4 to 5 feet. She estimates from tip to tip. The tail was as long as it was tall, um, and its eyes were, glowing red eyes. But she says that the one thing was that no matter how much light it was in, this thing it was absorbing the light. It was kept in darkness. It's still very defined, but still very much not reflecting any light. They went home, and they told her mom, their mom was, immediately saying, es una bruja, una lechuza. A lechuza is, in the Hispanic culture, is a creature a witch that can change into a winged being, an owl, an eagle of any kind. Um, she did a blessing on them, ran an egg over them for, mal de ojo, which is evil eye, which is all basic, curandera fare. A lot of Hispanic families grow up in a huge mixture of brujeria, and curandera. So, and when she would not let them out of the house for the rest of the night. Um, when I talked to the dad, he did not. He adamantly told her, "I did not want to speak to him. I do not want to, invoke this thing back again." Um, she spoke with me. Her English was not the greatest, but I can translate into Spanish. So yeah, pretty interesting, pretty interesting story. Very close range sighting, and again, just another sighting happening in and around the Hispanic area of Little Village.
Yeah, this is what gets me. Now, that was the 10th sighting that we had in Little Village.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an 11th sighting later on that we'll talk about. Tobias, the size, have we had any of that size before?
Oh, yeah, right around that 4 foot mark. In terms of reports, there have been descriptions that were on the smaller side. They're not. It's certainly not as common. Reminded of the report, and I wish I could remember where it was exactly. But I believe the witness described the thing as either similar to flying squirrel, or maybe the thing was hunting squirrel. You might remember that better than me, because
Yeah,
I think
that was the one up in the tree, wasn't it?
And that was small.
Yeah.
Maybe 3, 4, 5. And then I had a report in northern Wisconsin of a winged being that was in description to the general qualities that we get with reports. But, in terms of size, it was very tall. We're talking 6 inches tall or something. And that was strange, but yeah, it's certainly an outlier in terms of data. We're looking at just raw report. That is unusual.
Mm-hmm. Huh. Well, I mean, the next series of sightings that we had were out at the airport, and these were from the firefighters. I think we had three different reports from you, Manuel.
Mhm.
So why don't you just start from the beginning and tell us what was the nexus of all that and what did you hear beyond it?
Well, I mean, the first sighting was the one that happened at the, I believe it was Station 2, that
Mhm.
is right there by Terminal 3. Um, they were coming. The one firefighter was on in the middle of a shift, um, and he says every time he's on shift, he brings his laptop because he's in the middle of a series that he was watching, so he would stream when they had downtime. So he was setting up his stuff in the common area, and he says that the he forgot his charging cable, so he ran out to his truck, and he said he kept hearing like a chirping, like a real distinct chirping. Mind you, it's maybe in the 30s outside, so um he found it really strange, and he kept getting this feeling like this was like he kept hearing like shuffling and like the feeling that he was being watched. Um So where the fire station is across the street, there's a big plant. That's the HVAC plant for the
Mhm.
entire airport. Um, Across the street there, on top of the building, was this um, 7 foot tall winged being with red eyes looking down at him, and it kept making this chirping, clicking sound as it watched him. Um, Evan took off and disappeared. Um, what was very interesting is he ran inside and he was telling everybody that was there, everybody that was in the common area. And for the next, he said to his surprise, for the next 2 hours, that's all they talked about. Some of these older firefighters that said, yeah, this thing's around. It likes to scare the living hell out of people. It's never really been known to be aggressive of any kind, but it loves to scare the living daylights out of people by appearing, watching over them, and then taking off.
Mhm.
Um, So, and this was about, I want to say about 11 o'clock at night that this happened. Um, the second one was the same station, same firehouse. I believe that this one was around, I want to say about midnight or so. It was a late night, but they were coming from fueling up the engines. So to fuel up the engines, they have to go to a separate part of the airport where the pumps are. So when they leave, much like you see here in Chicago, when one leaves, all of them leave. Just
Mhm.
in case there's a call, they're all right there. So they were coming back to the station from fueling up, and as they turned the corner to go toward the station, um, they saw this thing. It was on the ground, looking at them. Um, Crossed the street in front of them again, scared the bejesus out of everybody in the engine. Evan just took off on them. Um, you know, Everybody that talked about that one was same thing. We've seen it around, we've heard about it. People call it the Batman, of O'Hare. It's known as the Mothman, the Phantom. A lot of the people, the baggage hunters, call it the Batman of O'Hare. But it loves to do this one thing that scared the living hell out of people. Um, and then the third one was, I believe, Station 3, which is more located centrally inside the airport itself. Um, and this was on 4th of July weekend, I believe. No, no, this was New Year's. I'm sorry. They were watching fireworks. I'm sorry, I don't know why it's 4th of July, but this was about New Year's, and they were watching a fireworks display. So they were all outside, and this thing flew over them. Um, the entire house saw it. Um, Circled around them a couple of times, and then just disappeared into the night. Um, and they were all like, "Yeah." At first, I was like asking, was this surprise or anybody in shock? 'Cause, like some of the newer people were in shock, but for the most part, the older crowd, the older people, they knew, they've heard it, they've seen it, they've dealt with it a couple of times. So um, that's pretty much all three of those sightings right there. But these
Yeah.
are, Chicago Fire Department firefighters. They're assigned to the airport. I believe there are 4 station houses around the airport. Uh, All of them are very specialized units designed for fighting at fires at the airport. So yeah, these guys, most of them have had multi years of experience within the CFD. And it was just really weird to see these kinds of people. These people are not only first responders, what in ufology want to say they're trained observers, seasoned observers. So they're used to kind of seeing, they're used to seeing something, gathering information, and being able to give it back to you, with exacting detail. And they were able to give some really good details about this thing in the sightings that they had.
Yeah, the Station 2 and Station 3 are pretty close to each other. Station 3 is just north of Station 2, but I think there are 4 of them altogether. Let me ask a question here. Karen Peterson asked, what time of day are most of the sightings? You guys want to answer that? I mean, I guess we first thought in the beginning most of the sightings were at nighttime, but it didn't turn out that way. We're getting daytime sightings too.
Oh,
How
yeah.
about Tobias?
Well, it's as a category of the particular witness report falls under. A lot of times sightings lack the seemingly paranormal qualities that you would normally with a Mothman thing. And so there's good evidence that many, if not all, but at least many probably, of the daytime sightings could reasonably explained, prosaically. Like they probably have mundane behind that, be that misidentified birds or something similar. And so of the report of the potential to be paranormal, those certainly common at nighttime, but you've really got to examine each sighting on merits and then sort of try to take your conclusions from that rather than trying to make of all of as a whole, because if you do that, the whole thing it's not much sense.
Tobias, I'm going to have you log out and come back in, and I'll put you back because you're really breaking up on us. So
okay.
If you can do that, I appreciate it. So the next sighting we had was up in Waukegan, and this was sent to me. There was a family of 6 who had seen a black flying humanoid above them near Lake Michigan lakefront. And this was an older sighting. This was August of 2020 in Waukegan, Illinois. And actually, we had another sighting there previous to that, very close to the same location. But they were telling me that, and that was over at Bowen Park. I think you had talked about that was a skateboard thing, Manuel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That was
the one that we had seen it at the in and around that skateboard park.
Right. Okay, I got Tobias is back in. Yeah. So anyway, what they told me, I talked to the witness to get more information about the sighting, and she described it as 6 to 7 foot long human-like being with a small head. There were no visible wings on this thing, but there was detail to the body, even though it was solid black in color. Now, the witness could make out the body contour. It was a well-defined chest with pectoral muscles as it flew over them. The speed was not constant, as it would occasionally hover. And it did seem to be a living being because the legs and arms would change position. Now, the location was about 500 foot from the lakefront on Market Street, just south of Waukegan Harbor. Clear sunny day, about 2 in the afternoon. 6 witnesses, and each one of them described the same thing. So I did talk to the mother, and I talked to another member of the family, and I don't know what the hell they saw. You know, the fact that they didn't see any wing or any wings or anything outstretched. You know, we've had a few sightings that seem very supernatural. It just didn't make sense. Maybe this was another one of those. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, kind of gives out some vibes. You know, if you ever seen some of the flying humanoid sightings that they've had out of Mexico, what they've described as a witch or something,
Right.
or even the ones that look like the man who, or the extraterrestrial that's like on like a jetpack of some kind, that have come out of Mexico. And some of them have had some really good details. I mean, I remember a sighting scene where the guy saw the creature turn and look right at him, the extraterrestrial, and it had like a menacing look on its face, like it didn't want to be filmed. I mean, there's also the classic one where they said it's a witch on a broom, but whatever it was a solid mass, and it was pretty impressive to see that it was flying several hundred feet off the ground. So maybe that's what it was. You know, I don't think it could be anything like the Los Angeles jetpack, man. I mean,
no, I don't think that either. I don't think that's that whole thing is have they ever found anybody responsible for that? Do either one of you guys know?
No, it's not as far as I am aware. I think popularly it's being explained as potentially a balloon or something similar, but as far as I know, it's just unexplained still.
Yeah.
And I think, whoever it is keeping a low profile because that person's going to jail.
Oh yeah, they're going to jail. There's no doubt about that. I got another question here from Karen Peterson. Can people hear the wings, or are they silent? Occasionally, somebody will say they hear the flapping of the wings.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, people are seeing them hover a lot of times. You know, we get both. I mean, sometimes they hear the wings, sometimes they don't. So now George Morgan asks, and this is a good question: what is the significance of the red eyes with Mothman, Hatman, and other cryptids? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Well, no. In terms of significance, like that word in particular is difficult because that requires us to start to guess at things like I think traditionally history, you can see eyes being applied to monsters, you know, in fiction and as we're seeing in reported nonfiction, and it's always associated with evil or something that is a threat to humanity. And so I guess speculatively, you would have to then consider whether or not actually there is a third option. There are animals that naturally have red like that. It's not super common, but it definitely does happen. A good example, just in the Chicago area, would be the black-crowned night heron. They have that will give you red eye shine. And so that is possibly one explanation. But I think if you're again considering the most likely to be paranormal, you more or less to discard a lot of the information around potential biological qualities that pretty quick apart. I mean, nothing about these sightings really in terms of how we understand biology. But to go back to my original point, I think you have to consider, speculatively, what future, might gain out of having these glowing red eyes. So whether or not that's a reflection of our own fears, something being picked up on by this reflected still fear or something, or maybe it's some sort of natural defense that sort of feeds off of the cultural fear or something. But and all you can really do is speculate about it, because the overall significance of something like that is just for anybody. I mean, we could really guess.
And I do have to agree with Tobias on that. I mean, biologically, I don't think very many creatures have any kind of glowing eyes, even bioluminescent, because it would be detrimental, to giving away somebody's position.
Sure.
It could be something like if the heron. I've seen those things, here in the Chicago area, and if you don't know what you're looking at, and this thing will scare the living daylights. They're not small animals; they're fairly large animals. And then also same thing, kind of like with cats. Cats have that eye shine. That if you get, because their eyes are designed to gather light and reflect it back out. Um, I've also kind of thought, maybe what if it is like an extraterrestrial being of some kind that's maybe using some kind of technology. We have something similar to that in night vision goggles.
Mm-hmm.
That might be, giving off some kind of reflection to somebody else, but biologically, I don't think you're gonna, very many creatures are gonna have, glowing red eyes. If any that I've even known, because it's a detriment to their safety. Bioluminescence is used to maybe attract prey, but not, give away your position to anything else that might be predating on you.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a characteristic of an actual predator as opposed to the prey or something that's trying to keep itself hidden away from the predator.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to let it know you're out there because you've got these flash, these red glowing or illuminating eyes. I mean, I still believe there's a supernatural reason for it, but yeah, and you're right. These blue heron, we had the great blue heron down on the bay, and those things are huge. They're magnificently huge, and so I don't see where you'd see one of them, you'd be able to mistake it. But then again, people see different things different ways. It's all about perception, I guess.
Well, we have a lot of animals. I mean, I sent you guys a video or a photo, what was it, a couple of weeks ago, I believe, of somebody thought they had seen a great humanoid, flying humanoid. Turned out to be a turkey vulture.
Mm-hmm.
This thing was huge.
Yeah, they're big.
I've seen bald eagles in Wisconsin. They're not lying when they say these things are massive as far as their wingspans and everything. So, I would think that maybe under the right conditions, those things can be seen as some kind of flying humanoid. But I've never seen anything with any kind of glowing red eyes that would, other than maybe like, demonic or evil, or kind of like what Tobias was talking about.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are,
go ahead, Tobias.
Oh, right. I was going to add, also biologically. Now, obviously, eye shine is one thing. The eyes aren't in that instance, they're just reflecting light back. If you can rule out, it should be, well, it would be a huge detriment to have you actively blind, because that's just how eyes work. If you had eyes creating, you'd be able to see is red light. You wouldn't be able to see anything else, and you'd basically be blind. And so it doesn't make sense for that biological reason as well. What's interesting, though, is Manuel mentioned something like goggles or something. And recall a report I took from a retired policeman in Chicago by the name of David Ramos. And so he was something a 15-year vet of the Chicago Police Department. And he told me about this son. He was a relatively young, he was 12 years old in Chicago. And he was hanging out at the North Branch of the river there. And he was alone on the path. Friends were around down by the river. I saw this thing, and I'll cut to the chase here. Basically, he thought that it was wearing goggles because it had these big round red eyes. And, of course, the first that occurs to him isn't that these are natural eyes, because that should be impossible. The first thing that occurred to him was that it'd be somebody, wearing goggles, and so we have to consider that as a serious possibility. At least include it in the actual when we're speculating about this stuff.
Okay. So the next sighting we had was a gentleman from Wayne, Illinois. He said he had an encounter with a winged humanoid while traveling near his home. He was actually right down the street. He was on his way home. And this humanoid flew in front of his vehicle without use of its wings. I did talk to this gentleman. He said it occurred back in mid-September 2022 at the intersection of Smith Road and Mountain Ash Drive in Wayne, Illinois. It was approximately 10 p.m. local time. And he said a passenger was traveling south. Oh, he had a passenger, and he was traveling south on Mountain Ash Drive. And when he reached the intersection with Smith Road, he states that this 6 and 7 foot long black human-like figure swiftly swooped in front of the vehicle, about 10 foot in front of the car. The wings and the arms were tucked against the body, and it quickly glided from east to west, very close to the road. In fact, it was so close to the road that the headlights illuminated the winged humanoid. He said the encounter was so fast that he couldn't make any facial features, but the body and head were very human-like. He said he had been previously aware of the phenomenon in the Chicagoland area, and that's how he found me. Now, this sighting was fairly close to another sighting we had in Carroll Stream, Illinois in 2020. And, he seemed like he really did see something. I mean, you know how it is, guys. When you talk to these people, you can tell if they're trying to, try to pull the wool over your eyes. But I think that this was a brief sighting, but it was an interesting. I mean, it's just another one of these things that are seen that people can't explain, very humanoid-like, but they're not. They're gliding, they're quick, they're dark in color, and have a lot of human-like features to them. Marla Snyder has a question. Do you think there are numerous variations in species of these things, or do you think it's more about what people remember seeing?
Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, honestly, there would have to be numerous variations or species. I mean, we've seen so many different types since we've started this journey together. I mean, we've seen the short ones, small ones, tall ones. We've seen crested ones, the ones that are said to look like like bats. Some of them look like pterodactyls. Some of them look like owls. You know, I would think, yeah, there's no reason, rhyme or reason that why there should not be more than one, different kind of variation or species that we're talking about.
Let's see. Got another one. Another question from Summer Nights and Neon Lights. Wonder how many people have seen it and not said or reported to anyone out of fear of ridicule. Oh, I'm quite sure there's a lot of them. We're at 161 sightings that we feel may be credible. I don't know what percentage that we have gotten, but I'd say the percentage that we have received is actually a very small percentage of the actual sightings. Would you guys agree to that?
Well, sure. The most common narratives hear from witnesses is that they'll have the impossible sighting, this thing that they just can't explain. And being a social species, to go and talk about it. They want to have a release, if nothing else, of telling a story and having it be believed. Although to a loved one, it could be a spouse or a parent or a sibling or something similar, and they tell them about their experience, and the number one reaction that they get is to be laughed at, and it hurts. They don't want to talk about it after that, and until they find somebody like us, presumably, that will take them seriously. And to consider, after talking to so many witnesses and hearing the same thing over and over again about, didn't know that he was taking anybody else had seen or you have to, how many people don't find someone to share their experience with. People out there just saying that no one will leave them, nobody's seen anything like this, and so they just sit on these stories, probably until they pass away. Now in this, heard of the Mothman, they may have heard story. Most people, I hesitate to use the word normal, but it probably applies here. Most normal people don't know what any of that stuff is. They don't hear about it. Like, if I were to ask my parents, the only reason that they would have ever heard about it is because they have me for a son. But otherwise, like, if they saw a winged humanoid, they wouldn't have any idea anybody else anywhere had ever seen anything. They would assume that nobody had, and I think that that's probably a lot of people. And so, we are missing out on lots of sightings because people just don't know where or whom to speak.
Yeah, Tobias, I'm going to ask you again. Can you actually reboot your computer? I think we got a connection issue on your side. Could you try that for me, please?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So the next sighting was the most recent Little Village sighting over Little Village Plaza that was reported to you, Manuel. Can you tell us about that?
Oh yeah, that's the one with the skateboarders.
Right.
Yeah, this was a group of friends who were the little plaza is kind of like right behind the arches. If you ever go to a little village in Chicago, you're gonna see these beautiful arches that are like at the entrance of the little village. But right before them, a block before, there's a plaza there. Just think of a massive parking lot with about 5 stores. Um, Across the streets, the world famous El Milagro tortilla factory, and then there's a Spanish bakery that I know very well because the food is amazing there. My wife and me go there quite a lot. Then there's some restaurants, and then on taking up the one side of the far side of the parking lot is a massive flea market that's been there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, about 75 years. Um, and it's actually about to get torn down here pretty soon, sadly. Um, but these kids would use the alley. They lived in the neighborhood, so they would just use this paved alley that was there and to lead into that parking lot for skateboarding. They would just, sit there, you know, having a good time with their friends, doing tricks and everything. Um, Kind of like what skateboarders tend to do. So they were out one night and doing tricks and just talking, hanging out. And one of them saw something across the street on top of the flea market. Um, and it looked like a really tall man just sitting there watching them. They noticed the glowing red eyes, and it made them really, really uneasy. So they tried to ignore it. They kept doing their things, but they would not go away. Finally, this thing took to the air and flew right over the top of them, uh, and did not break contact with eye contact with them. Um, and they saw that it was winged. It was a winged humanoid. Humanoid like body, 7 feet tall. Wing. They said the wingspan, I believe, was about 20 feet tip to tip, is what they're estimating. Um, Now they immediately thought, lechuza, and they took off running. Um, they bolted for one of their houses. All of them come flying into the house, and this thing, they were certain this thing was following them. Um, so they all piled into somebody's house and stayed there. And they were even talking about that it could have been one of the guys' ex girlfriend. He had just broken up with an ex girlfriend, and that she had summoned a lechuza to go after him, as for vengeance. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
very, 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 very interesting sighting. Very, multiple witnesses, about 5 of them in total. Um, so that they had seen it. I got to talk to, like, I believe 3 of them. The other 2 did not want, including the one who had broken up with the girlfriend, did not want to talk at all.
Mm.
And that's something that's prevalent in the Hispanic society. The belief that if you talk about it, or that you'll sum it back up, that it'll know that you're talking about it, and it'll come back after you. Um, and also, like I said, the lechuza is another thing that's very prevalent. That it could be summoned by somebody who using witchcraft to to go seek vengeance against somebody who wronged you or slighted you or broke your heart, I guess. I mean,
The thing that impressed me about this sighting was, you gave a pretty good description about where they were,
mhm,
right behind the restaurant, right there at the edge of the parking lot, as opposed to the distance to the mall, to the flea market, which I estimated from what I measured was like 150 to 200 foot distance. And
mhm.
they saw the red eyes at that distance. So this thing must have really been putting it out there so that they noticed it at that distance.
One of the things about the witnesses, the one witness I did, the very first witness I talked to, kind of said something similar to what you said. They, it's like it wanted to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
It was forcing them to notice it. Um, so whether it was using magic or brujeria or something like that to make itself known or to be seen, it went out of its way to be seen. It went out of its way to go after them, to be seen by them. Um, so yeah, maybe it's got a way to dial up the eyes or dial up the magic, and to be able to get you to notice it. It in essence becomes the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Um, which I'm saying, if you're 7 feet tall with a 20-foot wingspan and you're sitting in Little Village in the middle of the night, yeah, you're going to kind of become the gorilla in the room. But
Yeah, this is one thing that has been fascinating to me from the very beginning, was that they aren't shy. I mean, they seem to be out there for whoever is around to see them. But another caveat to that is a lot of times these things are showing up in a crowd, and only certain people are actually seeing it. So, it's tough to understand. And we got a question that kind of goes along with that by Dave McGinnis was, what explanation do each of you favor for what this phenomena is? What do you think, Tobias?
Well, let's see if I can get through the entire answer. My internet is causing me to lag so badly that I have to restart.
Yeah, it is lagging.
Is it lagging still?
Yeah, a little bit.
I checked the internet and everything. It doesn't got a connect. A lot of trouble with whatever reason. Okay, so in terms of what this thing is, I favor a particular explanation. I've always been more comfortable in talking about what I not rather than what I is. And as we know so little about the actual qualities of this thing or things, whatever they represent, the we can do is rule out things we have managed to disprove. So if I've got a particular sighting and I'm able to rule out misidentifications and the witness certain qualities that would basically require some paranormal phenomenon to be part of this, and you pretty comfortably say, okay, it wasn't a bird or an airport or hallucination or something similar, all things being but after that we were left with, now I could start talking about interdimensional creatures or undiscovered biological species, but at the end of the day we don't know enough to make determinations. I will say that in terms of favoring one over another, I don't particularly favor the undiscovered biological species hypothesis, simply because so much of what is described doesn't make sense given our understanding of biology. And so I would think that if these do represent some of other worlds of being, then there must be some paranormal aspect to it.
How about you, Manuel?
I have to agree with Tobias. I mean, undiscovered biological entity would be groundbreaking. I mean, we have only discovered, I believe, in my belief, that we've only discovered a fraction of the creatures that live on this planet, but something humanoid and something that can fly with that kind of wingspan. I believe me and Tobias and you, Lon, have had this discussion before. A normal sized human being, let's say 150, 170 pounds, 20-foot wingspan is not going to cut it. Or this thing would have to be so jacked, so muscular to be able to support those wings and to have the power to fly. Glide, yes, we could see that, but these things have shown power to flight. These things have shown that they can jump basically vertically into the air and take flight. You're not only defeating laws of physics on multiple levels, but there's nothing. Yes, we can go into the whole bee can't fly thing, but this is a creature that is a million times more massive than a bee, flying all over the city of Chicago. And we're talking about defeating things like wind currents, dodging buildings and stuff like that. I would seem to think more interdimensional, maybe even ultra-terrestrial, extraterrestrial. We've already seen that, what the unseen ones want to do. How they've been here forever. They've been here since the beginning. I believe Bernadette's one as the one that said that they've been here from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So who's to say that they're not riding? They're jumping between dimensions from dimension to dimension. Einstein's proven that dimensions exist, that they they in importance in time and space they do cross, they do intersect. Maybe that's what they use. How many reports have we seen of Bigfoots being pursued and all of a sudden just up and disappearing? Canines up and disappearing. Grays or UFOs just up and disappearing in front of you. How do we not know that they can't? Just summon a dimension, maybe even the Fae, if you want to get into supernatural creatures. But I don't buy the whole it's an undiscovered species, because then that leaves the whole, Bigfoot, canines, mermaids, as a possibility. And that just doesn't seem like it works. So I'm more inclined to believe the interdimensional, ultra-terrestrial, maybe even extraterrestrial.
Yeah. After everything we've seen, all the people we've talked to, everything that's been reported to us, and we've been pondering this. We've been looking for excuses and rhyme or reason for it since 2011. And honestly, the only thing I can really say definitively, I believe, is that there's a supernatural aspect to it. And I do believe that most cryptids are like that, because there always seems to be something involved with most cryptids, like Bigfoot, cryptid canines, Mothman, where there's just something that's unexplained. Are they interdimensional? I think there's a possibility that they are. Can we prove that now? Not yet. I don't think so. But I'm not saying that we won't be able to. I think we will be able to eventually. Maybe you guys and me, we're not going to do that. Maybe somebody else will have to do that at some point. But when people ask me this, the only thing I can tell them is I do believe that it's definitely a supernatural being of some type. And that's the best I can say at this point. We've looked at the occult, we've looked at some type of sentinel being, something that's been summoned. We've looked at the particle accelerator thing without their Fermi labs. We looked at all kinds of different things, and really, I don't think we've come much closer to understanding, other than the whole unseen one incidents that were reported to us about a year and a half ago. I don't know. I mean, we're, I guess people expect us to have answers to this, but at this point, we just don't really have many answers to it. Do you guys agree with that?
Yes, very
yeah,
much.
Definitely. I like to say that, I mean, and this is true for both crazy people, tell you that they have definitive answers for. If we did, if it was known, could major at university, there would be major scientific studies. It would be known if it was knowable. And so it's even capable, at this point of being understood on that level is, it's something of a huge stretch. So yeah, of course we don't have answers. Anybody who tells you that they do have answers, that's a red flag. Don't trust that person.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm in the same boat with you, because, occasionally you will get a witness or somebody who's not a witness and tell you, well, I know exactly what they are. Well, I'm done talking to that person, because they don't know what it is.
Oh, yeah.
So, I do have another question here from, well, it's not really a question, it's a statement, which is, it's interesting. Summer nights and neon lights. I'm surprised nobody hasn't taken a pop shot at this thing. It is Chicago. Yeah, absolutely. I haven't heard of anybody taking a shot at it yet. And I'm not advocating somebody do that, but who knows? Maybe somebody has. I don't know.
I mean, this thing is seen all over the city.
Yeah.
I can speak from, from the perspective of the little village and other sightings in those areas. That no one's going to take a pot shot at it in in little village. Most of us grew up with our grandmothers telling us how these things were and how they worked and how vindictive these spirits were.
Mm-hmm.
Drawing attention to yourself and drawing attention to you um, would probably be one of those few things that you don't want to do. It's kind of like watching a bear with your 22 caliber and decided to take a pot shot at the bear, and you've just
Yeah.
drawn attention to yourself. No telling what's going to happen to you. Um, it is Chicago after all. I mean, you hear about it every day of the week, multiple times a day a week. Um, I'm surprised no one has, but even if they do, it's again, it's Chicago. It's just another Tuesday night.
Yep. Thomas Carroll asked, could these beings be drawn to areas of well-known tragedies like the Silver Bridge collapse and the Chicago fire? While maybe not harbingers of doom, but could they be drawn to the area for that? I guess it's possible. Again, this is something else we have thought about, and I don't prescribe to the harbinger thing, but or theory, but who knows? It may very well. Chicago has a very deep paranormal history. A lot of UFO sightings. The upper Midwest is well known for avian cryptids. So, I mean, maybe there's just something related to that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think the issue with painting that broad brush is sort of the issue that arises whenever you do that in the field. Because I'll give you an example. Like, you hear a lot of people talking about the relative of water to sightings, right? Well, in the Midwest, water everywhere. You wouldn't have anywhere in the Midwest relatively near to some body of water. We're very lucky that way. Because there is a correlation, doesn't imply causation. And I think with the idea of winged humanoids and tragedy, and really we can invert that and see why it doesn't necessarily work. Think about all of the tragedies that occur every day. I mean, think of all the major tragedies that have occurred throughout history, not involving winged humanoids for any particular reason. And so the idea that are particularly attracted to tragedy doesn't necessarily hold up under scrutiny. We don't have any evidence for it. And beyond that, it isn't necessarily really make it. It just doesn't really stand on its unfortunately. You could argue probably that a lot of the people involved in this things had suffered some tragedies, but who hasn't? And again, that in and of itself doesn't really imply any causal relationship. So yeah, no, I don't think there's really any connection in any way, honestly, between those ideas. I think that more than anything, why that is so persistent is the popularity of Keel's Mothman prophecies. Did that idea 50 years ago, and it's entrenched in the now when it comes that people are just constantly looking, and unfortunately, I don't think there's anything to be found.
All right, Tobias froze up on us.
Oh, am I serious? I wasn't right now.
Yeah, you're all right now. But it did freeze there for a bit. Anyway, let me get to these other two sightings, other reports that were more recent. We had I got actually the past week I had two of them reported into me. One was a 7-foot tall bat wing humanoid over in Pilsen, which was actually seen on an overpass, which was at South Laughlin Street and West 16th Street, where this woman was visiting her boyfriend at night, and she encountered this 7-foot tall winged humanoid. I had talked to her, then I had her send me a statement. She said she had just parked her car to see her boyfriend at the time in the Pilsen community. It was October 2019. I parked almost 2 blocks from the building. It was really late, and I was walking past under this bridge. Standing underneath was a 7-foot tall humanoid with veiny bat-like wings. It faced towards the wall, not directly staring at me, but was just standing. She got very creeped out. Started walking to where she needed to be, but when she looked back, she saw it again. Years later, she said she remembers seeing the creature and decided to do some research. Turns out many people in Chicago, of course, she just found out about it. And, when I talked to her, she was very forthright about it. And she does still seem to be somewhat affected by it, which a lot of these witnesses have. Now, she doesn't live in Chicago anymore. She actually lives in Michigan. So that was an interesting sighting. And of course, we get these incidental sightings from a lot of witnesses. And the one I just received a few days after that was over in Calumet City, and which is an area very near the Indiana and Illinois state line. And it's an area where we've had a lot of sightings, various sightings. This witness was driving into Calumet City, Illinois from Hammond, Indiana, where she observed an unknown figure in front of her. The humanoid unfurled its wings and flew over her vehicle. She said it was January 14th of this year, 2023. She was on her way to work approximately 5:30 to 5:45 in the morning. It was a light rain and dark. She was coming from Hammond, Indiana, heading west on 165th, which turns into 159th. I was between State Street and Wentworth Avenue in Calumet City, Illinois. So when I saw it, I was now in Illinois after passing State Street. I was in the left lane, and there was only one car in front of me in the right lane. This car was about 6 car lanes ahead of me. It's a wooded area, and I saw something alongside the car in front of me by the rear. Now, this thing must have been hanging onto the car or was flying. I don't know. I don't really understand what it was doing. She said she always watches for deer and raccoon and possums in that area. And she said she looked harder and watched and thought it to herself that it was a deer and it was running fast. But then I realized there's no way it was a deer. It was much bigger. Like I said, it was a light rain, dark, and had my wipers on. I started to speed up because I had no clue what it was at this point. So as I got closer, whatever it was went directly behind the car in front of me. And suddenly it had this huge wingspan and went up and over my car. She said she talked about it for weeks, telling everyone how it was very unsettling, and all I thought about, I thought about it ever since that morning. She says, I take the same route to work Monday through Saturday every day. And she thinks about it each time she goes through there. So, again, this is an area where, of course, but we've got many areas throughout the Chicagoland area where these sightings are showing up. So let's see here. We do have another question, more of a statement from Vocal Moss. Yeah. This is more a statement than a question. An entire community like Bensonville was uprooted due to the modernization of O'Hare Airport. Now he's talking about why maybe they're showing up, because we've had a lot of sightings in Rosemont, which is on the east side of the airport, and Bensonville is on the southwest side of the airport. We've had a lot of sightings there, just off of the airport property. So maybe there is a connection there somehow.
Kind of like you're disturbing their habitat, and now you're just seeing more of them. That could be. I mean, Bensonville has seen quite a lot of sightings. We've had, remember last summer we had a rash of sightings coming out of Bensonville. I
think we've had 8 sightings in Bensonville area altogether,
and some very close up sightings at that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So yeah, it could be. I mean that I can speak from experience because I also do Uber, and that whole area around the airport is just it's a mess. They're putting in a new expressway. They're doing all sorts of modernization. It's construction on top of construction on top of construction, and a lot of this area was previously forest preserve is now being torn up.
Yeah.
To make way for this stuff, and a lot of sightings have come in from that area. Quite a lot of sightings have come in from that area. Construction workers and whatnot in that area seeing things. Maybe we're disturbing something right there. So
I didn't really think about that. We have had a lot of sightings in these green areas, these preserve areas, of particularly just people calling them humanoids, not necessarily having something with wings. But there have been sightings. And of course, Chicago is well known for all their green areas, their preserve areas. Maybe the airport, maybe the airport did disturb something when they even first put the airport in there.
Yeah. I mean, it was an orchard for a while, for the longest time before it became an airport. And now they're even talking, they just had it on the news. They're talking about, as part of the expansion of this new expressway, there was an airline that crashed here, I believe in the 80s. It was a really bad airline crash. It lost an engine on takeoff. But that area has been basically a forest preserve since the day of that crash. The only thing that's there now is a Chicago Police Department canine training facility. But behind that whole area where the plane actually landed and killed all those people has been left basically undisturbed since that accident. And now it's being torn up because this new expressway is coming through. So maybe that's something that could have been disturbing. That'd be... A lot of people are, saying that that's sacred ground. They should just leave it alone, and in memory of it, nothing's ever been built there. And now you have this massive expressway coming through. Maybe that's something that's got disturbed, and it's manifesting itself this way.
And they also dug up they moved a cemetery there too. There were 2 cemeteries there. And Rest Haven's still there, but it's interesting that a lot of the sightings that we have had on the property have been near that cemetery.
Yeah. I think Rest Haven is going to be one of those where it's not going to go anywhere because of its location.
Yeah.
It's kind of out of the way, but it's wedged between 2 massive terminals. But even Tobias, who's been out there before, he can attest that you might be in one of the largest airports in the world, one of the busiest, but if you're out there and it's at night, you're basically alone. There is nothing out there. It is very. That's where I had my first encounter with the unseen ones. Is there, and you are basically alone in that area.
Yeah, it is. It is remarkably isolated. Is my internet connection better now? Because I noticed there was
it is.
I feel so stupid. There was this weird thing where it was connecting to this extender that I have on like the other side of the house. And so like I know, right? And so I fixed it. So it's like connected to the actual like main internet and not like the wireless like extender that's rooms away. So it should be much better now. So sorry about that. But
that's okay. Hey, it happens to all of us, man. I'm telling you.
Right. No, but Manuel is right about O'Hare in terms of some of the isolation. I mean, it really is like it's like its own small town, and like any small town, it's got little out of the way areas. So sure, hundreds of thousands of people are going through there every day. But they're sticking to the terminals. If it's not happening inside of the airport or on a runway, they would never see it. And speaking about Rest Haven specifically, it is a weird, isolated little cemetery back in there. And I've been there myself more than once, and it's got a real unusual vibe to it. And I know we've talked about this before too, in terms of there being some unusual quality just to that specific area. And I believe in our previous conversations, we sort of related it to how you'll hear about people having more paranormal phenomena in their house during construction, right? So like they live in a house where they think it might be haunted, and then they're having construction done or something similar, and all of a sudden that activity it is heightened. It's happening with more and more frequency, and things seem to ramp up. And so I mean, you have to wonder if there is some geographic connection, if there is something about that particular space, if all of this recent construction might somehow be related. The one thing that I will say about that, though, is it's difficult, I think, to really show even a strong correlation, only because when compared to other numbers, right? So if you look at, like, say, the 2017, 2018 stuff, right, there were a lot more sightings, and now, regardless, we're getting a handful every year, but it's not increasing. In fact, sightings seem to be going down, and so that makes me wonder, if there is actually any connection, and if there is, what it might actually mean, because I would expect then to be receiving many more sightings rather than having them sort of go down, unless there was sort of some initial onset, some like something that's just sort of kicked it off, and then there was a huge spike, and then it just sort of went down after that. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think about, and it is a very unusual sort of storied area.
Yeah, it's something I never really thought about, but of course, we hear people talk about O'Hare and the ghost sightings people talk about. I've talked to employees at O'Hare in the past. Ghost sightings in the terminals and other areas. Someone had mentioned at the crash site there have been ghost sightings there. I mean, if they're in there disturbing that area, who knows what could pop up? But you mentioned something, Tobias, about the sightings seem to be slowing down. Well, we've had these waning periods before, and then all of a sudden it hits it. We just start getting a whole bunch of sightings. Maybe not as much as we did in 2017, 2018. But yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, I personally believe this is something we're still going to be dealing with for a long time. I don't think there's really any end to it. And, will this thing manifest into something bigger eventually? Who knows?
I agree. I mean, think about how some of these places have had trauma, so much trauma, and that it's actually scarred the land. When they put in some kind of construction or something, it's really caused all sorts of activity break up. I read article not too long ago about talking about like battlegrounds, kind of like near you, line where you have Gettysburg. I mean, when they're
Mm-hmm.
putting in the visitor center or the road, I mean, I'm sure they were probably seeing all sorts of activity ramping up because that land, even to this day in 2023, is what, about 150, 200 years from the battle. It
Mm-hmm.
still bears the scars of that land.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've been refurbishing the Little Round Top Devil's Den area now for about 18 months. They still got a little bit to do yet, but I did run into, and I mentioned this on the show before, I did run into a construction worker or a worker that was been up on Little Round Top at one of the at the actual museum there. It's I don't know, it's an artifact museum basically, but the guy who runs it actually sells artifacts. But he was in there, and I heard him talking to the guy who owns the store, mentioning that he's been working up, on the refurbishing of a Little Round Top, and he and I got to talking about it, and he was telling me he comes in there in the morning sometimes, and stuff's being moved, boulders are being moved, lots of things are being moved. I mean, things change. They'll be there working, and a boulder will start running down the hill all of a sudden. So it's just, there has been a lot of activity since they've been up there working on it. So, yeah, who knows?
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say too. I think if you look at the totality of the sightings, throughout time at this point, the earliest sighting that I've received of a winged humanoid in that area is from 1957. In Braidwood, Illinois. Now, that is somewhat south of Chicago, but my focus has always been on everything surrounding Lake Michigan because it's never been just Chicago, right? And when you look at that, we have sightings from 1957, 1969 in Indiana with Floyd Hancock, 1971, David Ramos at the North Branch of the Chicago River. They're relatively spread out, and they go back a very long time, and there's nothing to associate them with anything happening today other than the phenomenon itself, right? Like there was no construction necessarily happening to tie Braidwood to O'Hare, right? But the description given by the witness Gerald is similar to what people are still reporting today. And so I think that when it comes to trying to look for explanations that sort of depend on generalities, like location, right? We need to look at the overall trends rather than trying to just focus on one limited space, right? Which just, I know, is frustrating because it makes everything even more mysterious than it already was. But we also don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here and sort of forget about some of the other really interesting sightings that we have just because they don't necessarily fit into any preconceived notion, right?
Well, think of all the sightings that have been in this area, even up by you, Tobias, with dating back to the Native Americans, the Thunderbird sightings, that have been reported. These things have been going on for hundreds of years. I mean, you can only imagine if you could talk to somebody from back then, how many sightings he'd probably give you.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the indigenous people did. There has been a lot of different winged being sightings. I mean, there's no doubt about that. That whole upper Midwest area is well known for winged beings, unexplained winged beings, large thunderbirds, pterosaur. We're getting the pterosaur sightings left and right here and there. George Morgan had any sightings in Europe. We get very few. I mean, I have had a few, I had a couple in London along the Thames, but nothing really significant as far as going into Europe. This is kind of off subject, but with this war going on in Ukraine, I'm kind of surprised we haven't gotten more sightings of phenomena because of that too. Maybe we will eventually, but during World War II, there was a lot of sightings. Of course, the Foo Fighters and a lot of weird stuff on battlefields, even in World War I. But we're not hearing a whole lot coming out of Ukraine.
There have been a handful of interesting UFO reports, but I would suspect, like in any active conflict area, like even World War II, it wasn't until after the actual war that people started talking about Foo Fighters publicly. And so who knows? Not to distract from the actual issue, of course, because there are a lot of people suffering in that area right now, and that needs to be our focus. But yeah, I mean, who's to say that after the conflict itself is resolved, that there won't be more reports coming from people who were in that area who had seen something like a UFO or something.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it may eventually, some things may come up eventually.
I mean, you talk about Ukraine. I mean, you got to think about the fact that you have, the Blackbird of Chernobyl.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple sightings before the Chernobyl accident seen there. Europe,
and that's really the only harbinger related type of winged being sighting that can actually be, have some evidence, because it was reported before that. Mm-hmm. Everything else has kind of been after the fact. Even if you talk about the Silver Bridge,
even Fukushima.
Fukushima. Yeah.
You've had all those the sighting at 9/11. You had sighting in Minneapolis during the bridge collapse. All those have been after the fact. Yeah. I believe the sighting of the Blackbird Chernobyl was happening a year or so before the actual event. It was.
It may have been. The witnesses, the statements that I have seen. And of course, that was Soviet at the time, so you're only going to get so much out of it. But probably up to 3 weeks previous to the accident, and of course, the Soviets were pretty tight-lipped about Chernobyl anyway. They weren't putting a whole lot out, and that whole story, that didn't really get out until later as well. So, but apparently, there were actual reports that were either filed with the town that was near there, whatever the name of that town was, or at the plant.
Yeah. There were even sightings there in Pripyat. I mean, of this thing before the event. But Europe, you also have things like the Owlman of Cornwall. Those have been sightings. There's some in Germany, but they're not as numerous as what you see here in the United States and North America.
Cryptids in general are just, you think about cryptids, you think about North America. You don't really think about, of course, Great Britain has had a lot of different sightings. But when you're talking about in Europe, in Asia altogether, and, it doesn't really hold a match to with the United States and in North America, Canada. But I don't know, maybe us people here in North America just got better imaginations. I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. Well, I think we're pretty well out of questions now. So, guys, why don't you, if you have anything else to add at the end here, go ahead and do so now. Go ahead, Manuel.
Well, I mean, UFO Clearinghouse is still up and running. I've had to take some time to actually slow down, and I'm building Paranormal 1, which is going to be the new iteration. But between work and family, it's been a little kind of put on the back burners, but you can still find it at UFOclearinghouse.com. I also have the Facebook site, the Twitter site. So yeah, I mean, we post as often as we can, and we do still take sightings, UFO sightings. We still take abduction sightings, and we still take cryptid sightings as well.
And Tobias.
Oh, sure. So if you're interested in keeping up with what I'm doing, of course, you can find me through the Singular Fortean Society. The website for that is singularfortean.com, or otherwise follow the Singular Fortean Society on social media. I believe we're represented basically on any social media platform that you can think of, and it's always going to be at Singular Fortean. I do have a couple of appearances coming up later this year that should be pretty interesting. I'll be at the Great Lakes Paranormal Conference in Glenbeulah, Wisconsin in September. And then I will also be speaking at Strange Realities in Nashville, Tennessee. And that will be in early November. So definitely check those out if you get a chance.
Well, very good. And guys, thanks for coming on tonight, joining me and catching up on these sightings and reports. Folks, we're going to have more coming, believe me. There are some irons in the fire, and we will definitely be coming up with some more information. And of course, this Friday night on the Chicago Mothman, O'Hara Mothman, and O'Hara Batman series, I'm going to start talking about some of the sightings and how they started happening and being reported out of O'Hara. So I'll probably do at least one or two more of those before that ends, and then we'll go into some regular personal reports. So, guys, I appreciate you coming on tonight. And again, we'll be talking with the folks soon and catching up on these reports.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Always a pleasure.
Okay. I'll see you all soon. So, folks, thanks. Thanks each of all you coming on and chatting and watching tonight. I wanted to get this in before some other things happen the next several weeks, and of course, you have been following me with the personal reports when I've been talking about what's been going on in and around Chicago with these sightings. So, but again, if you have a sighting or encounter report that you'd like to be considered for the personal report show, or even Fams and Monsters, feel free to forward to my email at lonstrickler@famsandmonsters.com. So please like, subscribe, and share. And until we meet again, stay healthy. And I will see you Friday night. Thanks.